smells like shit in here. It's the sewers, Pauly. What did you think it was gonna smell like?
Leroy!
Charlotte?
I wanna go home, Lee. I'm scared.
Charlotte, what the hell are you doing down here? Who the fuck are you talking to? Pauly, you can't see her. See who? Are you fucking with me?
Put your gun down, baby. I'm scared.
What the fuck?
Can we go home, Lee?
Steady that light, Russo. Steady that light.
I need the battery.
Mine's off too. Hey, Joe, hurry up. Get yours on. Can't see, man. I tried. You got to understand the type of man that Leroy had to have been, especially in like the times of segregation and all that. Like, I mean, he had to be undoubtedly the best choice for that position. So that means that he just has a code of how he works that has been working for him.
That is what you do in 1962. You smile and you hold it together and you're as buttoned up as your starched, ironed clothing. But really, you are holding and suppressing so much.
I'm Marc Bernardin.
And I'm Princess Weeks.
And this is the official Welcome to Derry podcast.
This episode was a big one. The episode where everything finally collides.
Every storyline, every secret, every terrified scream, it all tunnels down to the same place.
The sewers, because of course it does.
And once you're down there, the truth is twisty.
Yeah, not everything is as it appears. Not everyone is who they seem to be.
Some faces aren't faces at all.
Some smiles have multiple rows of teeth.
Must be a bitch to floss.
We're diving into episode 5, 29 Neibold Street, written by Brad Caleb Kane and directed by Emmanuel Osei Kufer Jr.
And joining us are 3 incredible guests. Taylour Paige, who brings Charlotte Hanlon to life.
Jovan Adepo, a.k.a. Leroy Hanlon.
And Rudy Mancuso, the man behind Pauly Russo.
Be warned, there are spoilers for episode 5 ahead, so grab a flashlight.
Trust no one.
And whatever you do, don't start singing along.
All right, so we're finally starting to get some answers. First off, we get what Shaw's whole plan was. Hanlon walks into that room, is like, you gotta tell me what's happening. I just saw what Dick did to Tanyel in that room, and you seem happy about something, so explain to me what's happening. And Shaw drops the info.
You're telling me that there is a prison and we're looking for the bars?
Exactly right, Major. Halloran flipped through that boy's mind like it was the morning paper. Now we know exactly where they are and how to get to them.
To do what, sir?
To reduce the size of its cage. To contain it.
You mean to capture it?
And I'm just like, so you think, General, that you're gonna take this primordial force and control it? It's like, imagine if we had it in this situation. Like, I'm imagining it. It doesn't sound great.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that it's ludicrous, but it's also just like, yeah, they would do that. And that's what makes Leroy decide that he has to move his family onto the base, because as long as they're in town, they're going to be vulnerable to it. And he's like righteously pissed off that he wasn't informed that, oh yeah, if you live in a nice little house in the suburbs, your son might get burned by a clown. FYI.
I mean, you'd think they'd put that on the door outside the house that you're about to buy.
Exactly. It's like, did they die? Worse.
Yeah. Listen, what else happened? And Rose, she's the one who says it to Shaw's face.
You think you can put a leash on this thing? It can't be controlled, Francis.
Francis? I love that she only uses his first name.
Yes.
It undercuts whatever power he thinks he has. Suddenly he's a Francis. This is not in any way to besmirch any Francises in the world. You guys are great.
We love you, Francis.
You're my favorites. But yeah, like Rose is not having it. She wants her nephew back, and she wants them to stop doing what they're doing. Like, would you just stop poking this bear? And when Shaw's like, no, I'm a bear poker. I poke bears. It's what I do. She pretty much forces her way into the situation because she's got a magic dagger, pillar, alien thing.
Thank God.
That is the secret weapon to help keep it at bay.
I feel so bad for Rose, because to be so betrayed in such a like deeply personal way, it's like personal romantically and it's also personal culturally. Like, he is using their relationship and this sort of like belief in their, you know, their bond to like mosey his way into her, not just her culture, but like her land, her territory, and just like taking a huge colonial dump all over it. And it like makes me sick. It's like, it makes me sick, Francis.
And then we go over to the standpipe, and somebody has come back to say hello to our losers.
Maddie,
Where have you been?
It's Maddie.
I don't like it. I don't like it.
It's okay. You don't have to.
In the sewers. Below Derry. That's where it lives. The clown.
That boy ain't right.
That boy ain't right.
Openly telling me about people's brains being eaten. Too much information, Maddie, okay?
Oh.
In front of my salad? Like, are you crazy?
In front of my salad.
Because you didn't say anything about helping anyone with their brains. So,
No.
like, how do I know you're not complicit? It's giving zombie. I would have beaten him with a stick. I'm not a good person.
No, I mean, at least Will is asking some smart questions and coming to like some
thank
smart
God.
conclusions.
It kept some of us alive. Like it needed fear.
And while the kids are trying to figure out who or what they just met at the standpipe,
Across town, someone else is about to find out exactly how dangerous Derry can be.
All aboard the Shawshank Express.
Hank Grogan being shipped off to Shawshank.
Well, you save your better work fast, Grogan. Last fish we sent in there didn't survive the week.
And an aggrieved father comes bursting out of the crowd, assassin style, to try to bury a bullet shot in poor Hank's head.
Burn in hell, you son of a bitch!
And Charlotte is watching all this with this look on her face that is both horror and complete memory of having seen stuff like this before. Like she, a veteran of the civil rights wars, is now like, oh, not again.
Right.
Are we doing this again?
And I think what the show manages to do is perfectly infuse the existing racial dynamics with the terror that Pennywise also likes to play off of. Like, it's not that Pennywise is not creating the racism, but he's like, it's great that this is happening. Love this for me. Will be using this. And I think that's what makes their storyline with Hank so threatening because of how real it is. Like, this could be happening to him in so many circumstances if children were just generally missing around him, even if it wasn't a killer clown. It is just that he is there, he is marginalized, he's a Black man, and I'm glad Charlotte is on the ball. The only smart parent in Derry.
And then in the midst of all of this crazy insanity,
You're a dead man, Grogan, you hear me? You're a fry for what you did to my kids!
Charlotte looks over and she sees the precinct door, and there's a cop standing there. A big cop, a sweaty cop, just looking at her, smiling, like banging his little billy club, and then he's got those little buck teeth.
It's a double fear, I think, in that moment of just like a white officer in general, and then that like little twist. It's a turning of the screw, to quote Henry James. Shout out to him, R.I.P. Of just like, not only is it like a white police officer already this authority figure that causes fear, but then you have that smile, that sinister little, very effective.
Yeah. And then we have Lily and Marge, who've been through the ringer, but are now reunited. After the whole I'm sawing my eyes off incident, Marge realizes that maybe the patty cakes weren't the best group of friends for her to be with. And she misses Lily, and Lily brings her into the crew, into the losers.
What's she doing here? I just want to help. I'm supposed to trust a patty cake? X. Hey, it came for her too.
But then, of course, the children decide they have to go into the sewers to save their friend who Maddie claims is alive.
And how are they going to do it? With the greatest idea in the history of child adventuring, pharmaceutical courage.
Love it.
Mommy's little helper? Exactly. What Will and Maddie said about it feeding on fear? Well, if it's got nothing to feed on, then we have nothing to worry about. We'll each take as many as we can. Are you sure that's safe? My mom eats these like M&Ms.
It's a staple of the genre, you know. When in doubt, drug it out. Those kids are going to be so high.
For real. Like, they're just going to be, like, leaning on each other, trying not to fall down in the sewers.
I think I took too many pills.
Your hand is really soft. Like a kitty cat's belly.
That's a really weird thing to say.
Are you guys feeling this?
Oh, God.
We are tripping balls.
Pretty much.
So yeah, everybody descends on Neibolt Street. The military, with Taniel as the sort of unwilling guide, Dick and Leroy, and poor Pauly. Poor Pauly.
Poor Pauly.
I mean, we're going to have to pour one out for Pauly when we get there, but that dude is nothing but, you know, if this is a show that has a fair amount of, like, not great white people, Pauly's the one who's like, I'm ride or die for you, Leroy.
Yeah.
Like, I love you, man. I really do.
So sweet. He reminds me of Will Smith's white friend from Independence Day.
Harry Connick Jr.
Yeah, Independence Day, a perfect movie.
I know.
No, I feel for the kids. I feel for everyone. I feel for Dick. His grandmother is haunting him, telling him not to open the box. And then we see his evil grandpa. It's hard out here for father figures. It's hard out here for dads. I'm so sorry, fathers. You're either not around or you're malevolent AF.
100%.
Come on, boy. Open it up.
I ain't open that shit.
I ain't telling you one more time.
I ain't
Open
open
the
that
damn
shit.
box. Open the damn box!
No.
Every time they're talking about what's in the box, I kept hearing Brad Pitt in Seven. What's in the box?
What's in the box?
What's in the box?
For me, I'm like, my Dune head is in there. I'm like, pain.
I shall not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is a little death that brings total obliteration.
I let it pass
I will
through
face
me.
my fear.
Wow, we're so dorky that we're all
Oh.
like,
Deep nerds. So yeah, we have our whole misadventure in the sewers.
All of the tunnels are underground where none of the children will ever be found.
Yeah, we realized that Maddie wasn't Maddie the whole time. We're not with a skull that opens like a Pez dispenser. And as he's doing his little, body work on the pole, doing his best body yaddy yaddy, suddenly it's Pennywise.
Now they live down here with the clown. Duck and cover, kiddos.
gotta keep my baby off the pole. It's just, again, this is why my discernment, you should have beaten him with sticks. But yeah, it was just like very gross when they see the dead body parts of their other friends. Definitely one of those moments where I was just like, yeah, kids, you never go into the sewers.
Never follow a pale boy to a secondary location.
No.
It's never a good thing.
If you do, bring fire. Bring a little fire just to take the edge off.
Meanwhile, while our losers club are seeing faces and kids and things they shouldn't see, so is poor Leroy. Charlotte shows up to him in the sewers.
Charlotte?
I don't want to go home, Lee. I'm scared.
Flashlights go out, because of course they do. And then her body starts doing weird stuff. That is always when it gets me.
Yeah.
Body's doing things the body shouldn't do. And then she comes at him, he shoots her, and then Leroy's now armed with the idea. He's like, man, if you see something in this sewers that you're not supposed to see, shoot it. Don't ask questions, just shoot it.
That's solid logic right there.
It is solid logic, but 3 minutes later, that logic is going to come to bite poor Leroy in the ass.
Right.
Because,
oh, yes.
because now as our losers club is running screaming from Pennywise in the sewers, having left Lily somehow all alone, I feel like Lily tripped over water, which, whatever.
It's the drugs.
And then suddenly here comes, Leroy got his gun trained. Here comes Will running down the thing. He is 100% going to shoot his son because he's been told that the sewers lie to him. And then Pauly also sees Will.
I see him too. It's real.
And then Pauly gets in the way of the bullet.
You're right, it's real!
Oh, shit.
And Leroy shoots his best friend. His best friend who saved Leroy's son.
It's okay. It's okay. It's my turn. It's my turn. I'm sorry.
It's so poetic. It's Shakespearean. Just like,
yeah.
I think that's one of the things about Leroy as a character that is like engaging and frustrating is that like he's so concentrated on executing the plan that once he starts with that whole idea of like, if I see anything that's not supposed to be here, shoot it. But he leaves no room to be wrong. He has to just trust in the system so much. And that's what gets him almost every single time.
Yeah. And so the sewers, not good for anybody. Lily, lost and alone, Pennywise just bears down on her.
Because you're such a good friend, but such a bad daughter!
And thankfully, maybe it's the hand of fate that had caused Taniel to drop the pillar dagger thing while he was escaping from the military. He dropped it in the water, and Lily's standing right in front of it.
Thank God.
And that's the barrier that keeps her safe from Pennywise.
What a good moment, because she was definitely going to die. You going to eat that little girl.
Done. He had all the teeth out and everything.
You know, you hate to have a meal interrupted, but you have to honor the binding clause of Cosmos magic and don't cross the barrier.
It's the rule.
Don't do it.
It is the rule.
Meanwhile, above ground, Hank has escaped from his bus to Shawshank after it quote-unquote crashed or was attacked. Who could say?
Who knows?
And he runs straight into the loving arms of Ingrid Kirsch.
What? Yes, Ingrid is the white woman he's been sleeping with.
Surprise. I mean, like, she's the only non-threatening white woman in Derry. We should have known.
And poor Dick, another person that everybody just seemed to lose track of in the sewers because he's in his own.
The most important person.
Yeah.
I want the person with supernatural vision in front of me all the time.
100%. You know, Leroy comes out of this and he's giving a statement to Shaw about what happened and how Pauly died and everything. And it's like, well, what happened to Dick? I don't know. He fell in the water and never came back out. We see what happens to Dick as he comes stumbling out of the sewers by himself. And suddenly he sees Pauly, but he sees dead Pauly.
Ugh.
And so apparently what was in the box was the ability to see dead people. And, you know, it's a turning point in the series where nobody can seem to be in a place where they don't believe that Pennywise is real.
Right. Watching Taylour Paige as Charlotte throughout this series, the way she carries both strength and a sense of justice and fear, it's truly breathtaking. You can feel the weight of her history in every look, every pause, every choice she makes. I got to talk with Taylour about what it means to bring that truth and fire to a story like Welcome to Derry. And Marc, she spoke with so much grace. I'm kind of obsessed with her now. I'm a fan. She is a powerhouse performer who brings honesty, intensity, and charisma to everything she does. You might know her best from the 2021 hit genre-bending film Zola, the period drama Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, or the nostalgic dance series Hit the Floor. But now she's bringing her light to the role of Charlotte Hanlon, a civil rights activist, a partner to Major Leroy Hanlon, and a woman who does not accept things the way they are, but focuses on what they could be. Welcome to the show, the beautiful, the talented Taylour Paige.
What? That is such an intro, girl. You give me chills.
It's all true.
My God. That is so, thank you. Hello, I'm Taylour Paige. I'm happy to be here. Let's talk.
Well, thank you again. And I'm just so enamored by you in this role. It's so compelling. It's so rich. And I just wanted to know, what was the process for you of landing this role? And before you starred in It Welcome to Derry, what was your relationship to the horror genre? Like, were you a fan of it?
So I am a fan of genius creativity. So all respect to Stephen King and that brilliant, wacky, crazy mind of his. But no, I am a scaredy cat through and through. I blame the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
It'll do that.
Yeah, that was like, that's it. This is where I draw the line. It was that and Final Destination that had your girl scared, okay? Like, I remember being a kid and just being like, I don't want to get on an airplane.
Yeah, that was like a generational chokehold for us.
Right? They had me. Woo! So that's where I drew the line. And the process, my agent at the time said that something really cool has come in and I should have a conversation with these brilliant siblings. And I was like, yes, of course. And we met on a Sunday and it ended up being the Zoom of 2 hours where they explained the world to me. They explained how they wanted to do this prequel. And I love period pieces, so I was already intrigued. But also, we just talked about the humanity of it. And Barbara and I happened to have matching tattoos. And it felt just divine. And it felt like I'm going to be seeing you guys very soon. And that was true.
And this is not your first period piece. So what sort of research or preparation, either like personal or political, historical, did you do to kind of inhabit Charlotte as a character and the mindset of this very complicated time period that we seem to still be living in sometimes.
Yes, oh my gosh, speak on it. I really love that question. Charlotte is a tapestry of a lot of people that I've both known and admired that I don't know. So, honestly, I was looking at the Supremes, Diana Ross, but then I also thought about my grandmother who was born in the late 1930s, so she probably would have been about my age, Charlotte's age in this. And we used to have a lot of conversations about what that was like. She said that in certain ways, segregation, there was a time where just being segregated kind of created this there was a different kind of relying on each other in the community that was interesting that she saw also change. And I just thought about just her little cute self with her starched, suits or her women were starting to wear pants. I have these pictures of my grandmother and the way she'd hold a cigarette, though Charlotte doesn't smoke, but just all the little dainty carefulness, the careful pronunciation, the my grandmother till she died lived in the South and I would see her change, when we're at home in her living room versus when we're out and about at, Kroger or something. And the question means so much to me because I do think about my grandmother and I think about our ancestors and I think about the weight of the world and what that we feel it now. It's a complicated time. It feels like it's always been a complicated time to be alive. And then it's more complicated to be a woman. And it's even more complicated to be a woman of color. So then I think about the brilliance of this story and that it's what's fascinating about Stephen King is that this is almost like a multiverse, and there's something really captivating and interesting about the thought of us now. Like, Charlotte is our ancestor, but, like, what I do now also heals her timeline.
Absolutely.
Like, it's not a linear thing, there's, like, quantum possibility, and I think that's really interesting without going too wacky.
No, I totally believe that. We carry, like, those ancestral ties, and I think, like,
Yes.
in a show that's concerned with time, having those connections that you can pull to are just so important. And you said that your grandmother lived in the South primarily. Is that kind of how you started to do your accent work? Because it's so hard to do any Louisiana accent. So what
Yeah.
was that like of, like, transforming your voice and, like, having that voice of the character come out?
Thank you. Yeah, so my grandmother was from Houston, Texas, but we are Creole, but I did work with a brilliant dialect coach, Jane Fajita. So beside working with her, Charlotte, Shreveport, Louisiana, but I also wanted to kind of add a little bit of a transatlantic pronunciation because I felt like Charlotte being the homemaker, the bored homemaker that she is in the times where she did get in trouble with her husband for being out there in the street and being an activist. She'd have to go home and pout and she'd have the news on. She'd have her shows. And I think the transatlantic accent, All About Eve and certain actresses, I think that she probably practiced, imitating these people. So there's a combining of the transatlantic and Southern pronunciation. And I think all people, depending on who you're with, change their voices depending on their level of comfort and their level of familiarity. And also when they want to prove that they're intelligent or they've been exposed. So I put all of that into Charlotte.
I love the idea of her code switching into, like, Betty Davis. Such good character thinking, and I think it's so true, like, that would be their way of, like, "Well, I'm going to enunciate everything."
Exactly. And it's like, okay, no one actually talks like that, but go girl.
Exactly, "But I shall."
But I shall. Exactly. Yeah.
Mhm. I think that's perfect, and I think, Charlotte as a character is someone who's moved from Shreveport to Derry, was involved with activist work, which is so important at this time period. How did you imagine her mindset of going from, like, her Black community work to, this PWI place,
Woo.
a predominantly white institution for those who don't know, and, having to leave behind everything, like, yes, there is turmoil in the South, but it's also, like you said before, community, your people. It's the devil that you know to now the clown devil you absolutely don't know.
Yeah, right? Some bullshit.
Bullshit.
I think she's super it's disappointing. And I've said this in some interviews recently, but just that is what you do in 1962. You smile and you hold it together and you're as buttoned up as your starched, ironed clothing, but really you are holding and suppressing so much. It's interesting because coming from the South, there's overt racial tension. And then you go somewhere like Maine where the whole thing is how progressive and different it is over here, when really there's this warped, complicit banality of evil, weird thing going on. So it's really complex because Charlotte, I think, gets there, is already skeptical because she's like, why when I was actually making movement? And I think she felt like she was contributing something. Even if she got put behind bars a couple times with the rest of her activist community, she still felt like, well, I'm doing something. And she was a teacher. She felt like she was contributing something. And so I felt like Charlotte was coming undone. Like, if you have her in a little suit, like any moment, like one of those buttons were going to pop.
That's so pivotal, yeah, and I can only imagine, like, when you're used to dealing with, like, aggression, then you have to deal with, like, white northern microaggression.
Exactly, yeah, which she kind of gets when you meet Charlotte.
So, you passing through? Oh, I actually just moved in. I suppose I do really stick out around here.
And he then, like, walks it back, but she's like, "I clocked." It just makes you feel crazy.
No, that's so key. And do you think, both as, like, someone personifying the character and just as someone who's also, like, living the character and adding your own to it, is there a scene or a moment that you felt was especially pivotal to understanding Charlotte's character?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. I had a lot of fun in episode 2 because I asked, this is such a small detail, but when I play a character, I'm all for making them as real and specific as I can, even if it's in my own preparation, thinking like, okay, this is how she got up this morning. This is what she thought, this is how she made the bed. Like, thinking about that before I even step on set helps because it feels like I'm giving it rhythm, giving her rhythm. So the scene where I tie my hair up, where Charlotte ties her hair up, I was so happy that Andy was open and down for that. And then he also had this funny thing of having she goes, "I'm gonna get organized," to show that she's a little bit kind of all over the place. And then she pushes that box off the bed, which is just so irreverent and not buttoned up and just so Charlotte. And I loved all of that. I just loved establishing her as someone that's complex and a person and more than just the character we have to play when we're out there in Derry.
I gotta tell you, there's nothing that comforts me more when I'm watching a show with Black women in it than when I see them actually have headscarves on. Like, we live in an age where, like, you're wearing a whole lace installment and no bandana in the heat. Lord, what are we talking about? It's so distracting because it's like, that's not authentic.
You can hear your grandmother's mama's mom. Somebody's like, girl, you better tie that hair up.
Exactly. Charlotte's power really comes through in those quiet moments when she's choosing which battles to fight, when to speak, when to stay still. She's constantly absorbing chaos, trying to protect her son and hold the line for the cause. What was it like to portray that kind of strength? Someone who's always holding and maybe holding back so much.
I love the craft. I love acting so much. There's just so much possibility and discovery in yourself because you're the instrument. So you're like, ooh, how much further can I take it? How much further can I feel and think these things? And, it's kind of, with all due respect to therapists, not saying I'm a therapist, but it's almost like getting to prod at being somewhat a psychologist. You literally get to take the unconscious and bring it to the conscious based on the writing. And so I guess it's like an amalgamation of all these things one considers to basically decide when to speak and when to be quiet. And when you, as human beings do, we so much is left unsaid, but there's so much said when you're not saying anything. It's just really fun to explore that.
And my last question for you is, what is a part of Charlotte that you recognize in yourself or vice versa?
So naturally when you play someone, you have to find some kind of something, some kind of symmetry, some kind of like something with each of you, you know? And she doesn't just see things as they are, but what they could be. That is something that I love about Charlotte and that I find similar to myself. That is how we're here today in 2025 is the people that thought it could be better. And today in 2025, that's I think what makes us continue to try and share and make things because we all have a sense that it doesn't have to be this way. It could be better.
Taylour Paige, thank you so much for chatting with me. It was amazing.
Thank you for that.
You know, one of the things I love about Jovan Adepo's performance is how human, how authentic Leroy feels. Both strong and uncertain, brave and haunted. He's a soldier, yes, but he's also a man fighting to keep his footing in a world that keeps shifting underneath him. Our guest today is one of those performers you just can't take your eyes off of. You've seen him in Watchmen, When They See Us, The Leftovers, and Fences, and now he joins the world of Welcome to Derry as Major Leroy Hanlon. Jovan Adepo, welcome to the podcast, man.
It's such a pleasure to be here, Marc. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. I guess, given when I look at your resume, it had me wondering, were you a nerd when you grew up?
Was I a nerd?
Were you a nerd? Like, because there's a lot of genre on your resume. There's a lot of stuff that what draws you to material in this space?
Well, I feel like to answer your first question, my friends would call me a nerd, but I don't think I was. I identified as more of a jock. I played sports growing up. But to speak of the genre in my resume, that's not something that I've ever planned. I don't lead with, telling my reps, I want to be the genre guy. I just think I've always led with the character, what the particular character in question is going through, and how to play it as truthfully and sincerely as I can. And it just so happens that a good portion of my resume, if it's not drama, is in fact high concept genre projects.
What was your relationship to the book, to the films, to Stephen King before you got into this?
So I was very familiar with Stephen King, one being because I remember the original miniseries Tim Curry starred in. Definitely terrifying to watch as a child, for sure. And I played another character in a Stephen King series called The Stand. I played Larry Underwood in a limited series. So the Stephen King world is one that I am at least somewhat familiar with. So getting a chance to come back in a different character and really get to explore a world much more intimately was an exciting prospect that I was honored to have.
Speaking of Leroy, he is such a fascinating character to me because he's surrounded by people who challenge him, right? He's got a wife who questions the systems that he trusts, a son whose curiosity and imagination do not at all fit what Leroy's trying to hand down. How do you think about all those layers, the soldier, the husband, the father, and the way each one forces him to confront the idea of strength?
It was a really, really fun assignment for me to get to delve into that because my father my father's still alive and well, God bless, is Leroy in a sense. He was also in the Air Force. He was born in Tennessee, just like Leroy was. And I remembered what it was like as a child being raised by my father. And I wanted to understand what it was like for him being a young man, trying his best to build a strong foundation for his family, building a place of security and just a place of being safe and loved. So I got a lot of time to talk to my dad. It was his favorite thing. He was like, bro, sit down. Let's talk about my first time going, getting my orders, going to England where I met your mother and everything. It was just a really fun assignment to just get to figure out what it would have been like. And of course I had to add in the fact that he wasn't serving in the 60s. My dad was born in 66, but just trying to relate what he told me about being a young father in the military and what it meant to raise his young boys to be men, which meant being incredibly strict, but being loving but stern, and doing your best to include your wife in the day-to-days of what your life is like, but there are some things you just can't talk about or that she wouldn't understand, and how that can sometimes put up a wall in you guys' relationship. I mean, this was, like I said before, just a really interesting exercise that I got to share with my father, and it helped me a lot in playing Leroy.
The other relationships, I mean, you and your son in the show, Will, is a pillar of that story, but so is your relationship with Dick Halloran and Charlotte. So how do you approach those two relationships? The marriage built on love but strained by worldviews and, the unlikely bond out of shared understanding and survival of the unknowable. What do those two reveal to you about who Leroy really is?
Well, I think more than anything, he wants to lead with his heart. I think that he has a way of doing things that has always worked for him, being in the service. I remember when I first got the part, Dale Dye, who does like a lot of military advising and consulting and almost every fucking thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, you got to understand the type of man, the exceptional human and the exceptional airman that Leroy had to have been to be an enlisted officer in the 60s that has met, major rank, and especially in like the times of segregation and all that. Like, he had to be, undoubtedly the best choice for that position. So that means that he just has a code of how he works that has been working for him and has been successful. He's fought in 2 wars and has come out relatively unscathed. And I just think him coming to Derry and trying to find the footing for his family, he's wanting it to be what his wife has always wanted, what his son has always wanted, but their methods to the madness are just different. And that was something that was fun to explore with Taylour about the characters because they are so different, but our assignment was to find the through lines of what bring us together, like why Charlotte and Leroy love each other, even though they are so, so different. The work I did with Chalk was a bit different. We have a very interesting relationship, and I can't wait till you guys have seen the entire series because Andy kind of explained it to me in Chalk that we're the odd couple because we end up essentially just having a very interesting dynamic from the beginning, which was also very fun to explore because Dick Halloran is older than Leroy, but Leroy's his superior officer. So I always loved to play it in the beginning of the episodes that Leroy, he's demanding respect. He's coming into this city that's predominantly white. He already has masters who doesn't want to salute him, doesn't want to give him the respect that he's earned and he's fought for. But then to see this brother that he meets and he's like, oh, you're not giving me my due either? Just because, you don't respect authority, it's like, bruh. So there was a thing where Chalk is very good at pushing my buttons. And he's good at pushing Jovan's buttons. I've known him for a long time. We work together on When They See Us Together. Like, he's the guy, he knows how to like push him. And he uses it on screen, but I know it's making the performances better and it's making our scene work together better. So I always welcome it. But yeah, there were some takes where I just couldn't help it. Like, as the character Leroy, I would get pissed off because Chalk is playing Dick a certain way where he's just not hearing me at all. He's like, yeah, fuck you, cornball. I'm not hearing what you're talking about. This is Dick Halloran. Like, this is my shit. And I'm just like, oh my God. So it was just fun to play that.
The episode we're drilling down on, episode 5, is such a pivotal one for Leroy. There's a scene in which you understand for the very first time why you were brought to Derry.
Right.
What the military is up to. And there's something really symbolic about a black soldier being brought face to face with a monster that feeds on fear while living in a country that so often uses fear to control. How did you think, and what was your perspective on the way Welcome to Derry posits the intersection of race and horror and power?
Well, I think it's just that. I think that they had a very careful approach to it. I think it would have been really disappointing if they ignored the aspect of it being the 60s and being the time of, touching the Jim Crow era and things of that sort. I think it just wouldn't have served the show. So it was really refreshing that they were open to really making sure that that was something that was discussed and talked about. It doesn't come off too heavy-handed. I think it's just enough because it will remind people of a time that we actually lived in. And then it just adds more flavor once the more sensational elements come in with the actual literal monsters and once Pennywise really starts to terrorize these people. I think it's just really colorfully done and it just adds layers. It's important, in my opinion, whenever you're dealing with sensational shows or genre shows, as they often are, you really have to be careful in how you build the characters so that the people watching they give a damn about the characters just in a day-to-day life. Like, if they care about them as they wake up and go to work and, this couple is having marital problems and this soldier is having these issues with his boss, whatever, if they care about them in the most normal way, when you do bring in the more sensational elements and the monsters and all the extra things, it just hits that much harder. And I think it has. I think it's really hit off in a really strong way.
I don't think you can have a show that deals with race and class as dead on as Welcome to Derry does if it was just about that. You know what I mean? Like, there's something about genre that lets you talk about the real in a way that you couldn't just say, I'm going to do a law show, or I'm going to do a cop show, or I'm going to do a whatever.
Right.
And for me, it goes all the way back to like Twilight Zone and Star Trek we're going to talk about these things in ways that we coat it in just enough candy.
Right.
That it's a pill you're willing to swallow.
Right.
And so watching, Welcome to Derry, and it's like, no, there are scenes where there are just black people on the screen.
Right.
Just like being at dinner, just hanging out, just talking about stuff that it's difficult to find now more than ever.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, when you're dealing with genre, you get to stylize the way that you do talk about these subjects. You get to like you said, wrap it in candy, and you can find metaphorical ways to talk about certain things. And then like I said, Jason and Brad and Andy and Barbara just really, you have to trust them in building this. They've been with this particular piece of IP for so long that they know the world. And Andy, there's nothing in that book that Andy can't answer about this world, about this specific story, or the book in general. And so I just think that it was left in really good hands.
So, in episode 5, your character spends a lot of time in the sewers, right?
Right.
And I gotta say, that set looks very impressive. Like, it's immersive and it sets a great, creepy tone. But I imagine it was challenging to act in those dark tunnels, wading through knee-high, sometimes waist-high water. What was that experience like for you? Were you impressed, or did you kind of hate it?
I think you worded that wonderfully. Impressed me and pissed me off when we had to go back. So Emmanuel directed a brilliant episode, and it was a super intense episode. Impressed because the set that they built was wonderful. The sewers were so complex and intricate, and it looked like it was supposed to. It looked like Pennywise's, his resting place, his hunting grounds, if you will. But just that sequence, that entire episode I spent like 3 weeks in chest-high water. They try to heat it the best they can, but it's still cold. And, in between takes, you hop out of the sewer and you're sitting in your chair and you're just wet. Combat boots are soaked. Like, it was just, there was so much going on with the filming of it because it's so dark. Like, the way we had, like, the red searchlights on our vests, and then we had, like, the traditional flashlights on our firearms. It was really hard to light us because they couldn't have people in the sewers because they're so tight. And there's, like, 8 soldiers in the sewer. There's no room for, like, a lighting setup. So we really had to light ourselves, which is like, I'm not a fucking light. I don't know how to light myself. I'm an actor. But so that took a lot of filming time. But we got through it. And then we finished the episode. And then we went on strike, I believe, if these dates are adding up. And then we came back to finish the show. And there were a couple pickups in that episode that we had to get. And it was one of those things where you get your one-liner sheet and you're looking at your master schedule. And I'm like, yo, what's this sewer ? And they were like, yeah, we're gonna be going back into the sewer. And I was like, fuck me. So like just to have to be like in that element again, and just, I don't know, it was a heavy sequence, but it ended up looking great. When I saw it, I was like, okay, that's why we do it.
Yeah.
That's why we do it.
The episode comes to a flashpoint in a real way when your boy Pauly is trying his best to be a good wingman, and takes a bullet for Leroy and his family. What was it like to film that part of it and sort of carry the weight of that moment?
That was, again, as we talk about the stressful element of that episode, just not even just being in the sewer. Because at some point when you're doing these heavier scenes, the uncomfortability that your body is feeling only helps. It really adds to the whole thing. You don't want to be completely comfortable because then you're just robbing yourself of feeling raw feelings and the opportunity to surprise yourself. And so me and Rudy, we didn't talk too in depth about Leroy and Pauly's relationship, but I do a lot of journal work and kind of came up with an idea of the type of relationship we had and spoke with Andy about it. And he, in my mind, he saved my life in the last war that we fought in together, where I received my really bad brain injury. He was instrumental in me surviving and in me wanting to get back to my family and just fighting through the pain. And so we have to find ways of showing that. So when we were doing the scene, there's this incredible amount of guilt that Leroy feels, because more than anything, Pauly has the line, make this one count, make it count. And I'm inconsolable because he's always been like my rider. Even with the bug episode, when I'm getting jumped by the guys, he's always been there. And the least that I could do is to be there for him in return. And I'm the one that essentially, leads him to his demise. And so filming that scene was really difficult. And to put on the fact that when we did it, it was during a reshoot because they had changed something about the set or something, or the lighting, something about that moment wasn't right. So we had to redo it. And we were kind of really pressed for time for this particular night we were shooting. And I don't know if it was the acting guys, whatever it was, but me and Rudy were just tapped into it.
No.
What?
I want to rest. Let me rest.
No, fuck that. You can't rest. We gotta get out of here.
No, listen.
We gotta get the fuck out of here.
Hey,
I got you.
leave.
What?
Leave.
What?
It's okay.
Yeah, Rudy just gave a brilliant performance. And I guess my through line for my performance was wanting to take care of a friend who, like, this is the last time he's taking his last breath. So just giving him all the love that he needs.
I'm sorry, bro.
Make it count. Make it count.
And it's fascinating to see how that guilt propels Leroy forward.
Right.
Leroy does not process that well.
No. And who could? I mean, this is
who could.
Like in that one episode, he gets so much of an information dump put on him that he's been asking for episodes. Like, dude, just tell me something. You're only telling me half the story. He's finally getting this welcoming into Operation Precept and learning about Halloran's abilities or what have you, and then for the first time really being affected by its powers. If we're talking about when he sees, or when he thinks he sees his wife down in the sewer, it's like. And I always like to tell people when we do interviews, it's like, people are like, how do you play a man without fear? And it's not that he's just like, completely absent of fear. He just has a higher than normal tolerance for it.
Yeah. It did strike me as something very interesting that the military, Shaw, thinks that having no fear is an asset.
Right.
But fear is kind of what makes us human.
Absolutely.
And so Leroy has to work extra hard to compensate for the fact that he doesn't respond the way your average person would.
Yeah, he doesn't. But and I spoke to Andy about that when we were going through the scripts before we actually started. And I've had these conversations with Jason Fuchs as well, and Brad, is that I really want to be careful in how he's played, because in a world where, we're telling this story about it who feeds on fear, and the main character, or one of the main characters, is fearless. What is the acting assignment, and how do I play it without being fucking boring? And so Andy brought up the point that you have to remember that being absent of fear just opens you up for having much more freedom to express other things, other emotions. Fear is not the only emotion, and there are some emotions that stem from fear but may not quite be fear. Anxiety, curiosity, anger, whatever it is, like you can. And so in the beginning, I was worried that I would be trapped into this kind of, I don't know, like, not Die Hard, but, some military guy who, I never smile, like the kind of the old school cheesy, like he's tough, like he doesn't, whatever, he nails in a cereal, whatever. But they were like, no, that's not what we're building. I mean, Leroy is a man who loves his family, and, he appreciates his superior officers, and he's passionate about his job. So, you just have to do your best to paint that performance. And I hope that after people have seen the show that they agree that I have.
What do you hope audiences take away from both Leroy and from Welcome to Derry?
What do I hope that they take from it? The effect that trauma has on generations. Most fans of it know the lineage of the characters, especially here specifically the Hanlons. And it's really interesting. If you were to never have seen both of Andy's movies, and then you start from the show, watch the entire series, and then watch the films, it'd be really interesting to sort of track the generational trauma that has kind of seeped its way into Mike Hanlon's life. And not even just like the specific like family lineage, but like the lineage of the community of Derry, just the ever-existing shadow that just sits on top of that town. And I hope that audiences will understand the importance of like embracing the trauma and doing your best as a family unit to repair it and to heal it.
Jovan, thank you so much for being on the show.
It was too fun. Such a pleasure.
That scene that Marc and Jovan talked about, Pauly's final act, captures everything Welcome to Derry is about. Love, courage, and the cost of trying to do the right thing when the whole world's gone mutant bat baby crazy. So to dig even further into this character's heartbreaking death, I had the privilege to sit down with the actor who brought him to life. Our guest today wears just about every creative hat there is: musician, filmmaker, actor, and all around rhythmic mastermind. He may have gotten his start as a viral Vine sensation, but he's now bringing internet breaking moments to the It universe as Pauly Russo. We're talking to Rudy Mancuso. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm very, very excited to be a part of this.
It's so great to have you. And you have worked with the Muschiettis on The Flash and other productions before. What is it like being part of that creative team, and what makes it click so well, do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. They can't seem to get rid of me. Yeah, I don't know. I've always felt this sort of instinctive creative alignment with Andy and Barb. We share this fascination with this unique sort of intersection of the surreal and also the deeply human. Like my work is obviously very musical and rhythmic, and there's a lot of musicality, whilst theirs are more kind of atmospheric and tense and dark, but also in a way very, very musical. So we speak the same language in that way. And since then, just been finding excuses to collaborate. You know, Andy was in my film Musica. I was a part of The Flash. I'm now a part of It. And now Andy, Barbara, and I are working on a new film together that I'm directing. And, you know, I just, hopefully it's a lifelong relationship.
That's so beautiful. It's been so lovely to hear everyone's great experiences working together. Like, just as a nerd who loves peace, it warms my heart. You mentioned your project Musica, which I was a huge fan of, and it really gave people a window into synesthesia and how it shapes the way that people see and hear the world. Did any of your musical inclinations or how you see the world affect the way you constructed your character in Welcome to Derry?
I don't know that it was necessarily conscious, but music and rhythm is sort of the foundation of how I think and how I do everything, whether it's participating in a grandiose universe like the It world or producing, directing, composing my own material. It's the foundation is always rhythm. There's a rhythm to dialogue, there's a rhythm to performance, there's a rhythm to comedy. And so Andy and I had some conversations about who Paul is, even though he's a small part of this show and this season, is an important one. And we talked about different iterations of the character and some of the characteristics Pauly possessed. And something we added in his backstory was that he was a musician, and he sort of a secret passion of his was playing jazz piano. And there was even a talks of there being a sequence that revolved around that earlier on. But to answer your question, like, yeah, I think my approach to anything I do creative, even if it isn't apparent or very explicit, rhythm is a part of every choice. So when I was improving as Pauly, you know, playfully antagonizing Leroy or going on one of his rants, I'm very subconsciously thinking about music and rhythm and volume and tempo.
Was there any particular scene or sequence that challenged you the most, either technically or emotionally? Because we're dealing with both very technically intricate sets and emotionally heavy hitting narrative.
In the pilot, there's a very more physically demanding kind of stunt action sequence, which is very outside of my wheelhouse. A, because I'm a pacifist, and B, because I just haven't done a lot of action sequences or stunt training. So that was definitely outside of my comfort zone in an intriguing way, particularly that scene where, you know, I'm protecting Leroy against those masked men. But particularly with episode 5, being in those sewers
Yeah.
was very tricky for me. I'm not a traditional actor. I'm not a trained actor. I'm more on the behind the camera side. You know, I've been doing more directing and composing and editing. So, you know, when we shoot 16-hour day weeks of being in this fully drenched, heavy costume in the sewers, I gotta say that that was the most physically and also mentally challenging thing I've ever been a part of as it relates to acting and performance. When I watch it, what the product is, it's so rewarding. It makes all those efforts so worth it. But yeah, being inside of that actual sewer, which looks and feels like an actual sewer because those practical builds are incredible. At a certain point, you forget what the distinction is between reality and fiction because those things are so massive and lifelike
And intense.
incredibly intense. It's super dark. You know, it's real water. It's the real outfits, and I think that it all contributes to the performance and the eeriness and you know. Discomfort is important. You know, if we're all comfortable all the time, we don't deliver truth. So yeah, I think that that discomfort contributed to the performance.
Were you ever scared? Because I feel like I know that you know it's not real and you know what's gonna happen, but is there ever a moment where you feel like an actual tension there in those sewer scenes? Because I would have felt it, honestly. I'm sensitive.
Yes, especially in the beginning, because again, because they're so lifelike and practical and well made, it's hard to know the difference sometimes between fiction and reality. And most of the crew is hidden outside of the tunnel. So at any given moment, it was for a lot of it just me and Jovan, who plays
Leroy.
Leroy, alone with our little, the flashlights attached to our fake guns that were barely flickering on and off. So, yeah, there were moments, especially in the beginning, when it was certainly eerie, and it doesn't help to know that there's a supernatural being
Clown.
somewhere on the other end of these tunnels.
Absolutely. And I think the chemistry between you and Jovan in the series, but especially in episode 5, I think is so important. Your character saves his ass in episode 1.
Mhm.
And from the very beginning, there's this very easy chemistry between the two of you.
Saved your ass again.
Fuck you, Pauly.
Who the fuck were those guys?
I don't know.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh. How's my hair?
Still greasy.
Did you guys talk about what your character's history together was like? Did you sort of have moments to sort of sit together and be bros, building character
Mhm.
about bros?
Yeah. Oh, well, and I think that happened sort of organically as well because we spent so much time together on and off set during those weeks. And yeah, we talked a little bit about it beyond what was on the page. We talked about what is the sort of level of camaraderie and brotherhood that these two developed over their years serving in the Korean War, plus potential other missions and escapades. And undoubtedly, we've had a lot of intense experiences together. But, he's quite reclusive and tormented and traumatized in certain ways, as is Pauly. And I think our experiences together, we sort of deduced that it's culminated into this very alienating presence and a very lonely, reclusive lifestyle to a point where, at this point, outside of his own family or whatever Pauly's family is, they have this beyond symbiotic relationship. They're more than friends. They're more than brothers. They have this family connection and understand each other on a level that maybe no one else does, which is why I think they feel so safe around each other. And they're very contrasting personalities, I think. And also the size difference. He's significantly taller than Pauly. Jovan is significantly taller than Rudy. And there's something about that I infused into Pauly's character, which is a bit of a Napoleon complex. He has to overcompensate for the fact that he's probably the smaller of the bunch, especially amongst soldiers, but he's a hell of a pilot, and he uses his wit and antics and sort of personality as a defense mechanism, which is something that I did my whole life.
That really comes across. And I think it's interesting considering the time period that we're talking about. It means a lot for Pauly to take a stand with Leroy because
Mhm.
even as an Italian American at this point, they wouldn't have really assimilated into whiteness. So
Mhm.
him choosing to further other himself through this friendship with this black man, I think kind of speaks to where your character's mindset is at in a really interesting way.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think I would, quite literally, Pauly would take a bullet for Leroy, and most likely the other way around. I do like to believe that Pauly feels maybe like there's a little bit less to lose in his life. Leroy has this family
Yeah.
who he's in love with and means everything to him, and he'll stop at nothing to protect them. And it's not really ever explained or was never explicit in the pages, but I like to believe that Pauly doesn't have that. I don't think he has a wife back home. I don't think he has kids. I think he's, Leroy might be the closest thing he has to family. And yeah, I started thinking about my father moved from Italy to Newark, New Jersey in his early 30s. This was, I guess, a little bit after this time period, so more like the 70s. But he struggled to assimilate, and one of his best friends was this Black American man, and although their struggles were very different and they're from completely different walks of life, Welcome to Derry takes place in 1962. This is height of the Cold War, a lot of racism in America, so it's not far fetched that this crazy Italian American kid and this very earnest
Straight laced.
yeah, straight-laced and kind. Like underneath all of the armor is this really kind-hearted Leroy Hanlon. It's not. I believe that friendship because
Yeah.
I've seen it.
And I think that friendship and how you both play it makes the ultimate sacrifice that your character makes so meaningful, because we see in the beginning of the sequence, the Charlotte monster happens and he's just like, just shoot everything.
Listen, whatever you see down here that's not supposed to be here, you fucking kill it. Doesn't fucking matter if it's your first girlfriend, your high school gym teacher, you fucking kill him. You got it?
All right. Pauly! Yeah, I got it. Kill my gym teacher. I got it.
Okay, let's go.
All right. Freaking me out.
And then the real Will comes, and Leroy is ready to shoot him, but you, Pauly, know what's happening, and you throw yourself in front of that bullet.
Leroy, it's real!
It's a heartbreaking moment, and it also just, it's so many layers of tragedy. What did you think was going through Pauly's mind when he does it? And then on a technical level, could you talk about the stunt work that went into this moment?
Yeah, I mean, there were different approaches and iterations of that moment, and it's tough because some of it is left to imagination, and then some of the elements are practically there. But, I think it's the moment when Pauly realizes, I can see it too, right? This isn't an illusion. This isn't fabricated reality. I'm seeing the same thing that Leroy is seeing, and that's his son. So in that moment, he realizes if we both see him, he's probably really there.
Right.
And I think, what's really a millisecond is stretched to multiple seconds, which I think is reflective of anybody who's ever been in a situation like that where, it's the quote unquote life flashing before your eyes moment. I like to believe Pauly had one of those moments where he almost knew there's no version of this where we all end up okay and alive. And the sacrifice was necessary, but I think he's super okay with that. I think he accepts the fact that that's a bullet worth taking, because at the end of the day, I think Leroy has a lot more to lose.
Yeah.
And the tragedy of almost killing what you thought was an illusion of your actual kid was not worth it to Pauly. So I think this super sporadic, quick moment was stretched 10x for Pauly. And it gave him all the time to rationalize, wait a minute, that's his actual son. I could see him too. I need to interfere. Okay, I took the bullet. And after about 15 to 20 seconds, I think we see the character totally accept the fact that that's a sacrifice worth making.
Rudy Mancuso, this was a real treat. Thank you so much for joining us. You are amazing. I cannot wait to see what you do next. And you're incredible.
Thank you so much for the smart questions.
So we've got everyone in the sewers, Pennywise in full swing, and more secrets spilling out of Derry.
Which means whatever's coming next is not going to stay underground for long.
The box is open, the clown is singing, and Derry's officially gone off the rails.
Just another day in Maine, right?
Truly. Next week, we'll be talking with Stephen Ryder, who plays Hank Grogan, and Louis Sequeira, the brilliant costume designer behind all those unforgettable looks.
Trust us, you don't want to miss it.
Until then, keep the lights on.
And maybe stay out of the sewers. The It Welcome to Derry podcast is a production of HBO in collaboration with Spoke Media. The show is hosted by me, Marc Bernardin, and Princess Weeks.
Jenna Burnett is our senior producer, and Tess Ryan is our supervising producer.
Our associate producer is Addie Vaughn, with help from Montse Rodriguez and Trey Jones.
Sound design and mix by Sammy Syret.
For Spoke Media, our executive producer is Aaliyah Tavakolin.
Special thanks to Michael Gluckstadt, Allison Cohen-Sorokach, Kenya Reyes, and Aaron Kelly from the HBO Max podcast team.
Thanks for listening and see you next week.